those emissions associated with energy use in particular. So, turning on the lights, heating and cooling our buildings. And so that's kind of, a really mature focus within the industry. And as you can see on the left, that was, today that makes up about 27% of our total global greenhouse gas emissions. But this embodied carbon portion, isn't far behind, holistically accounting for about 20% of total emissions. And the reason that this is important is because when we look at the future of emissions and environmental impacts associated with our buildings, if we look at two scenarios of a building looking through 2050, as you can see on the right, the portion of the pie that's associated with embodied carbon is only going to increase. So right now, if you look at a standard efficient building, operational emissions might be a more significant portion. But as our buildings become, more energy efficient, driven by both better design and more stringent regulations and energy codes, embodied carbon becomes a much more substantial piece of the pie. And so when we start looking out over the next 40 years, embodied carbon is going to be, a big thing for us to focus on as an industry, which makes it super pertinent to this discussion about engaging youth, because this is a long-term problem. It's going to be a multi-generational problem. And so we also not only need to upskill our current professionals, but also make sure that we're engaging the next batch of professionals and youth interested in this topic. And so there has been, a significant pivot and ramping up of initiatives and commitments and awareness of embodied carbon, I would say, throughout the industry. So you can see, a plethora of different initiatives, whether it's AIA, SE 2050, MEP 2040, the Carbon Leadership Forum, as Megan mentioned. A lot of these organizations have really ramped up their focus on addressing embodied carbon, creating toolkits and resources and educational materials. And there's also been, a significant uptick in the amount of policy, both at the state and local level, that is beginning to address embodied carbon, in their codes. And so it's a big shift and big focus of the industry. And it's really important that we not only engage it as professionals now, but we also find opportunities to engage, the younger generation looking to enter into this field. Next slide. So I just wanted to quickly, talk about a case study that we recently completed the design of, and in a project that's currently under construction that checks a lot of the boxes as they relate to operational emissions, embodied carbon, and engaging the youth. So this is the University of Kentucky's new College of Design, the Gray Design Building. It's a project that used adaptive reuse to renovate a 106-year-old building, I believe, that used to be a tobacco warehouse, and kind of in alignment with the University of Kentucky's, focus on sustainability and their design programs. This is a great opportunity to showcase what is possible. So we won't get into all of the design details necessarily, but just wanted to highlight, some of the things that can be achieved through adaptive reuse to not only reduce operational emissions, but also reduce embodied carbon. Next slide. So, here's just a photo of the existing structure before the renovation started. So you can see on the left, the existing exterior, the facade, the roof. And then on the right, this is the groundbreaking ceremony. You can see the existing structure. For the most part, the vast majority of the enclosure and structure and foundations of this building were able to be reused. There was some additional shoring and some additional structural reinforcement and window replacements and things of that nature that had to be replaced. But for the most part, the guts and the bones of this building were able to be salvaged. Next slide. And so this just kind of gives you a feel. This is actually during construction as we speak. So Mitzi Vernon is the dean of the architectural program at University of Kentucky, and she has been documenting all of the construction in great detail if you want to follow her on LinkedIn. But you can see, some of the work that's going in that is going to still lead to some embodied carbon impact on this project. So in the middle, you can see some of the structural steel that's being added to the project. You can see interior partitions being added. And on the left, you can see where scaffolding is going up to, create openings in the floor to add new stairs. There's new, design features on the interior that are going to, still entail some embodied carbon emissions. But for the vast majority, you can see there's a lot of building that was able to be reused. And ultimately, if you go to the next slide, this is going to result in, a very modern, very beautiful interior space that does a lot for the university. So they were able to, for the first time in the university's history, co-locate all of their departments in one location, including studios, classrooms, multi-purpose space, and offices for faculty and staff. So the reuse of this building opened up a lot of opportunities there from a footprint and space utilization standpoint. And then these renderings are courteous of Studio Gang, who was the design architect on the project. But what's most exciting, I would say, about all of this adaptive reuse, other than just creating a beautiful building, if you go to the next slide, is that through the design decisions that were made, the total carbon impact was tremendous. And so just to highlight, the possibilities that are available as professionals when we start focusing on these problems through the HVAC system design, some of the envelope improvements that were made, moving away from central steam for the campus, operational emissions were able to be drastically reduced over a 50-year life cycle. But through the adaptive reuse and salvaging that existing building, repurposing, a building from 1917 to make it have a whole new life cycle starting in 2024, we were able to reduce embodied carbon by 51%. And so that's, a significant impact and something that can be a testament to what can be achieved in the future as well. I would just add to this slide very quickly that part of what we're working on right now is extending this study to include the MEP systems. So that's a portion of this embodied carbon scope that's been left out. And so the goal is to broaden this study, start to understand the more holistic building impacts, and see what lessons learned can be obtained from that. Next slide. And then lastly, as it relates to kind of the focus of this webinar is, how do we leverage projects like these from a learning opportunity standpoint to engage the next generation of designers, engineers, architects, builders, et cetera. And so what's really exciting is as part of this project, one of the things that we are working on is, partnering with the Department of Architecture, Interior Design, Historic Preservation Office, and leveraging the lessons learned throughout the construction and design process to create a curriculum that includes embodied carbon for future students to utilize. And so that is something that is kind of up and coming in the works. But right now you can see in these photos, this was a tour that was given of the facility during construction. A lot of students present, engaging that next generation and helping them to not only understand the problem of embodied carbon, but also help to evaluate current solutions and hopefully, create inspiration for them to create new solutions of their own. Next slide. So lastly, just to wrap up, kind of a call to action. Where do we go from here? I think, for professionals, I think it's really important that if you're currently in, the construction and design AEC world, that we have to start tackling embodied carbon now. So I say leave no project behind. I think that I really mean that. There's no reason that on every project that we touch, we can't do something to reduce embodied carbon.
What happened? They changed the title of the speech. That's why I couldn't find it. Dinglings. Huh?
And then
yeah, like when they sent the Zoom invite, they changed the title of the speech. So I was putting.
Sorry, I just muted someone.
Thank you.
Yeah, the second kind of call to action, I would say, for professionals is to find opportunities for us to engage the next generation of professionals. So it could be something more grandiose, like trying to leverage your building, your design to be a building teaching tool. We found if you work in education, whether it be higher ed or K through 12, there's typically strong appetite for looking for opportunities to create a curriculum around the project itself, using the building as a teaching tool, creating dashboards that can be used for STEM programs. But it could just be, engaging interns and co-ops in this type of work. It could be in getting involved in design competitions. DOE, Solar Decathlon, they all have programs that have design projects and competitions that have embodied carbon related aspects to them. And so they always need mentors. And so getting involved that way is another important option. And then lastly, I would just say for students, keep asking for resources and keep getting involved and looking for opportunities to come up with innovative ways to solve these problems. I think if we hear those voices continually asking for resources, the industry and these organizations will respond, including, higher ed and institutions. So that's it for me. And then I'll hand it over to Christian.
Thanks so much, Wyatt. Kind of to piggyback right off the end of Wyatt, I am one of those students who ended up bouncing around asking for a lot of resources, and kind of wanted to share my story of how I learned about embodied carbon and the different challenges I faced, and how you guys can then take action and really support students and young people in their journeys to reduce embodied carbon. So I grew up outside of LA and later moved to Taipei, Taiwan. I'm currently studying architecture and entering my 4th year at Brown University. And first became involved with the Carbon Leadership Forum by reaching out to Andrew and kind of having ideas about the intersection between equity, reuse, embodied carbon, et cetera, and ended up writing a viewpoint essay for them last month. In the essay, one of the key ideas that I really focused on and discussed was how environmental health and the health of people, especially in historically marginalized and underserved communities, were pretty intricately tied together. We can go next slide, by the way. And we really can't solve one issue without solving the other. For instance, when thinking about like the manufacturing facilities that guide a lot of new materials production and the production of building components, we also have to think about the communities that live around these areas, or the ones that end up forming around landfills when we deal with waste. When Portland first created their deconstruction ordinance, it started with people in communities worried about demolitions, about dust, about asbestos, and about lead, and not necessarily from a purely environmental standpoint. And when connecting these solution problems, it's important to realize that it's not just that a solution can't be solved by addressing one side, it's that it needs to be solved by addressing both sides. And that using these ideas of equity and starting with diversity and accessibility is this pathway and the solution to reducing embodied carbon. Throughout my learning journey, it really came from a lot of case studies and reading materials that I didn't always have access to. Most of my embodied carbon learning journey came from reading, came from really bouncing around and asking people questions. It came from really just digging throughout the internet and like joining conferences and webinars and trying my best to learn without necessarily like the resources or opportunities that were made available to me. And at the end of the day, I was really privileged to be able to learn about embodied carbon in a sense, because I have the name of Brown behind me, because a lot of my financial situation is covered by the school, and that I don't have to face many of the time constraints or financial barriers that many other students have in other universities. Many of my friends back at home go to community colleges and state schools and are equally passionate as I and have been thinking about energy, climate solutions, and really how can we fix this climate crisis our whole lives. And we have some pretty innovative ideas and solutions. And yet, because we didn't have, like many of my friends back at home don't have this curriculum or don't have these materials available to them, they're unable to make the difference that I feel like we have the potential to make. Yeah, can go a couple slides, Megan. As Einstein once said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And to like create more embodied carbon reduction and to really impact the environment and to help communities, we kind of need to change our thinking about how we approach students, how we approach young people in the conversation. Like we have an ability to kind of use this entire crisis to accelerate our shift in our approach to how we value people and how we value ideas, and realize that this is a topic at the end of the day that is pretty young, that we have a lot of really creative and smart people thinking about it, and that if we are able to be empowered with more resources, we can better make an impact and like do things that can change our future. So as a student, here are some meaningful steps that I think we can better take to engage the youth and bring them into the conversation. The first one, and I think Wyatt really touched upon this, it makes me almost want to transfer it to University of Kentucky, is to take the initiative and promote curriculums and to engage with educational institutions. Really offer to speak and use your influence as professionals and people who do care about the space to convince educators and provide them with resources so that they can learn about embodied carbon and then in turn teach their students. One of the big things about me at Brown was that I don't have any courses available to me that can really allow me to touch this subject. And it's something that is kind of overlooked in a way because not many people think and know about embodied carbon. In addition to just like in this, sorry, like in our focus on educational institutions, it's important to focus not just on the prestigious universities that do have like strong pedigree and history of research, but to focus on high schools and community colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, just everybody in essence. Like I said earlier, everybody has been thinking about this problem in my generation for quite a while. And a lot of people have really great ideas and are like historically overlooked by these systems. In addition, make educational materials, case studies, and conferences like much more financially accessible to students. When I look at a lot of the conferences and materials available to like for people to read and learn, a lot of them are geared towards professionals. And many of those professionals have like pretty like company backing to be able to access these. Students don't really have this type of access. And especially for those learning and starting out, it's a lot to commit like $50, $100 just to read an article or something. And I feel like this type of like wider access is what we kind of need to bring everybody into the conversation and make embodied carbon like as common of like a term and as knowledgeable by our generation as like energy efficiency or renewables, like things that we've had for now 20 years and are really able to make like really, really great changes to. I understand the need for like ticket and event prices, but it can be little things like setting aside a certain number of free student slots to an event, or opening up digital webinars and online students for all students, and kind of like giving these training in a very like free, like here it is, take what you can, learn what you can way, because this type of change is what's going to create more change. Lastly, like Wyatt also said earlier, I feel like we're of the same mind in a certain sense. Like opportunities and roles for students within companies are really important. And yeah, our inexperience is a blessing. It's a really great opportunity to learn and kind of take a new thinking approach to a lot of like problems that we've had for a while. I was talking to someone earlier this week about like the creation of a scholars program, and she had mentioned how in the past she made it a point to bring students on as panelists. This type of like empowerment and kind of giving students like a voice to share their own thoughts and ideas and expertise and kind of put them in these initial leadership positions are really great for us, and I think make a really big difference, much more than like we normally think. And lastly, for students, honestly, take the initiative and reach out. Kind of seems like a very, very like normal sounding action item, but everybody I've talked to has truly gone out of the way to help me. Everyone's excited and passionate about young people getting involved with embodied carbon. And you'll be surprised at like the doors that can be opened just by asking and reaching out to people. To kind of get started, we'll have a toolkit sent out later after the webinar for people to kind of get their toes wet. We also have an online community in the Carbon Leadership Forum for students to kind of like discuss and connect with one another. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I'll pass the mic to Julia.
Hey. Hi, we are Girl Scout Troop 1477 from Wisconsin Badgerland. We finished 7th grade, and since 5th grade, we've been working to raise awareness about embodied carbon and encouraging people to use low carbon building materials. We've had a lot of fun learning, reaching out to people, working on buildings, making materials, and we've tried a bunch of different ways to do it. It's been especially exciting to hear that our project is having an impact, and we're really happy to see more youth like us getting involved. Next slide.
You might be wondering how we picked this topic. We wanted to make a difference about climate change because we are very concerned about the future of our planet. We looked at a list published by Project Drawdown about high impact ways to reduce climate change. And when we saw concrete on that list, we were surprised because we'd never considered it. Most people we talked to, even people who were really into green building, were not that familiar with embodied carbon yet. So we thought we could help raise awareness. Next slide. When we started, none of our leaders or us knew anything about this topic. We didn't have any true parents in the building industry, so our project started with a lot of learning, watching online videos, attending virtual concrete conference, touring a concrete plant, and doing virtual and in-person meetings with researchers and industry leaders. We learned that embodied carbon is a huge part of the concrete footprint of a building, and there are a lot of different ways to reduce it. Next slide. We decided to make a video because it was something that could be easily shared and used as a tool to raise awareness. We planned out the visuals and did stop motion scenes to make it easy for anyone to understand. 2 years ago, there weren't as many resources to learn about embodied carbon, so we tried to cover basic approaches like using life cycle analysis, looking at environmental product declarations, and setting goals for reducing carbon, plus different ways to make concrete. Next slide.
We hoped our video could be used as an intro for presentations, and we've been excited to hear from professionals around the world that it has been used in university lectures, board meetings, and webinars. Also, special thanks to the Carbon Leadership Forum for helping us share our video. Next slide. Next slide. The video was how we started our project, but we have also been advocating for low carbon concrete and embodied carbon through presentations to local building industry and concrete chapter meetings groups at architecture events, sustainably focused organizations, and local city government meetings. We've heard that these presentations have been really helpful in getting people talking about embodied carbon and just knowing that we care as next generations. Next slide.
I think that Greenville is the slide for this one.
That's not the right side.
There it is.
Yeah,
There it is.
Oh,
In November of 2022, we hosted a booth at Greenbelt in San Francisco, along with Building Transparency, which created the free EC3 Embodied Carbon Calculator and Carbon Leadership Forum. We were able to present at the Women in Green Luncheon, and we got to meet Robin Carnahan, the administrator for the General Services Administration. She asked us, our troop, to make a short video for the GSA to share across their federal communications. Next slide. It's been really exciting to see results from our project. Our city's Board of Public Works voted to start using low carbon concrete. And low carbon materials procurement was included in our state's clean energy plan after we presented to the team working on that. We've heard that our presentations have helped to get the word out, especially because we're kids. We also helped, what are the next steps for our project? Well, we keep presenting locally. We hope to see other groups of kids like us doing this type of outreach in their own areas. So next, our Girl Scout troop leader, Julia, who has gotten really into this whole effort through this project, is working to help make that happen. So she's going to tell you about that next.
hello. Go ahead. So it's started out as a Girl Scout project, and it kept growing as a project. First, the presentations that the girls did got enthusiasm in our state enough to start a Carbon Leadership Forum hub here in Wisconsin, but the most important part of this was really the discovery that youth voices like the girls you just saw seem to really have a really strong impact in reaching people who are involved in building decisions. And from that realization was the goal to say, hey, how can we take this to the next level? What can we build from that? How can we use that momentum? And so the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative is a brand new effort that is based entirely on the lessons learned from this Girl Scout Troop project, and is really our way of trying to say, well, how can we share what we've learned as a troop from this project with other youth around the country, and really build on a lot of the same themes that Christian was also talking about, saying there's not really that much opportunity yet for young people. There's not that many resources targeted for young people. And trying to get young people involved is really a very important step in moving on this issue. Next slide. So why is it so important to have young people talking about this? Especially as a professional seeming issue, it's very technical in some ways. They're not ready to actually start careers on it yet. Why does it matter to have young people talking about this? People may ask. But first of all, this is their this is an opportunity for young people to be able to say, hey, we care about this issue, we care about the climate, we care about the planet, we want to make a difference. And while young people can do a lot of things individually in their own lives, it's a whole different story to say, hey, you can help make a change at the entire process of adjusting to a lower carbon built environment. So just having an opportunity to connect with professionals and learn from professionals and present to professionals, that entire interaction between young people and the building process, the building industry, and the building decision makers has a lot of potential to generate enthusiasm, generate interest, and just keep the dialogue going, because getting people interested and engaged with this topic is so critical, because there's so many building decision makers who have to be on board together to make decisions take place for a building. It's not just one, one architect or one structural engineer. Really needs the entire building team to be at least aware in a general sense of these concepts. And so having young people have a role in raising that overall social awareness of what is embodied carbon, why is it important, is a really great opportunity for young people. It's something they could do, and it's something that they can really make a difference with. And so the other big piece that we've heard in doing presentations, as you saw from the girls speaking, is that they have presented a lot of different audiences at this point. And we've heard repeatedly that part of what has really helped bring that message to have an added level of relevance is because it is something that highlights that this is a generational focus. This is a shift in perception about what are our priorities for the future. It transcends this entire, well, what can we do? What should we do? It really says, regardless of what you may or may not have thought about the urgency of climate change or the opportunities and the need to invest in this effort, the next generation is going to care. And so that really changes the dialogue and helps get a kind of a wider, a broader audience. Next slide. So when you're talking about getting youth engaged, it's really not just about talking to youth, right? No matter the age of the youth, whether they're elementary school, there were some younger girls involved in our troop project as well. So there's a wide range of how old a youth could be to be engaged in this effort, and yet it doesn't stop with them. It's really about carrying the message into their families, their neighborhoods, their communities. The more young people who are aware of this, the more it becomes an overall general social understanding, and engaging educators and building professionals in this effort with youth just stands to really have a broader reach. Next slide. So what is the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative? And there's a lot of questions about, well, how do we take this model for what has worked as a troop? How do we answer some of Christian's questions about bringing this to a broader audience? How do we do this? And the first thing that was really clear is that, first of all, there's really not very many materials that are targeted specifically for youth. So if you want to learn about this issue, you're really looking at resources that are generated primarily for a professional audience, or at least an adult general audience. And so when we were doing our project as a Girl Scout troop, that meant that the girls you just saw behind me, as well as the rest of our troop, sat through some fairly dense engineering lectures online, some fairly difficult to really piece apart what were the key messages, what are really the important things to get across. And a lot has changed in 2 years as far as accessibility of information since we started our project, but regardless, there continues to really not be a youth focus to any of this this embodied carbon topic. And so the need to develop real materials and get them out to young people into the classroom or into scout meetings, into sustainability clubs seems to be a really key goal. And getting professionals who are interested and engaged with this topic, talking with young people, is also a really big part. So there's really two pieces overall that the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative will be working to accomplish, and that will be developing resources and then collaborating with teams of professionals who are interested in engaging with youth to either help weigh in on those materials, help encourage their classrooms in their communities or youth groups in their communities to get engaged, and then helping take that to the next level. So potentially getting young people presenting at events, and sort of like Christian mentioned, having young people participating in events and presenting sort of in similar ways to the way that our troop is done. So there's a ton of opportunities here for how do we develop core modular materials that can be used across a different range of contexts, and then getting professionals aware that those resources exist and helping let young people get engaged on a more in-depth level. Next slide. So the general overview of what these materials will be, and because this is new, is still a totally work in progress, but the general approach that worked in our troop format was first establishing an understanding of why is this important, what is the impact. And in the first video we made, there was a slide that talks about, if there's 20% of the embodied carbon of just the concrete in a building, it was like taking 50 cars off the road for an entire year. And just very simple, wow, that's a huge amount of impact. And that level of impact was really something that drove our project, was understanding that, hey, if you can even just convince one building decision maker to make one decision in your community, that you can have more impact than 50 families to say, hey, you're not going to drive for a whole year. It was really a major motivating factor for this project, and something that if more young people understood the scale and the magnitude of that impact, that there'd be a lot of young people who say, how do I help get involved in that? Then it's about explaining, well, who are the people who are involved? Who can you talk to? Who can you learn from? And who can you talk to? And understanding what are the ways that they can reach out. Next slide, please. So the first set of options here, or the first set of actions here, would be developing resources in the form of toolkits, and that would be ways to really explain those basic key concepts and itemize out very simply, here are the things that you can do. Here's the messages that are key. Here's how you can customize your message. Here's how you can make this yours. Here's how you can share your voice. And make it fun, make it games, make it as much silliness and as much good time for students to really engage with them, and to make this understood as being something that is really a fun way to move forward. And so you'll see there's the games and activities there. And the second phase is really kind of a phase 1.5, is that the process of developing fun resources is a very central focus right now and is already in progress. And so when we get to the point of distributing those, that's where the partnerships that the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative is developing will come into play. Next slide, please. So there is a ton of really great organizations out there already doing youth sustainability education. The Carbon Zero Youth Initiative is not trying to reinvent the wheel here with youth engagement. There's really, really great programs like Grades of Green, but many other ones. Grades of Green will be Carbon Zero Youth Initiative's first partner, and because they have a system of toolkits designed to introduce young people to a very specific topic and identify how they can get involved and make a difference right away. And it's very modular and very digestible for educators or youth group leaders to be able to help guide their classroom, or for students who are older to be able to take on themselves. So the goal is to make this as simple and digestible as possible, and identify those ways that youth can make a difference right away. And so we're partnering with Grades of Green, which already has this model set up, and developing toolkits that can be shared, and they are completely free, available on demand anywhere in the world. They have teams of students already across the world doing launch project toolkits, or doing these launch programs around the world in the country. So it's really exciting to be able to collaborate with organizations that have already put together that framework, and that will help make distributing the content once it's developed available. Next slide. So there's a lot to be done. This is a totally new effort. The project from the Girl Scout troop is really still ongoing, and is really only kind of reaching this point where we said, how can we build on this momentum? And so this is totally new effort. and totally looking for anyone who is really interested in engaging with youth, or if you're on the, hey, I like brainstorming ideas, I want to be involved, or if you have an organization or your business is interested in helping encourage young people to say tour your facility or that sort of thing. There's a lot of opportunities to get engaged. So if this sort of a model and engaging with young people like this sounds interesting to you, please reach out as a follow-up, because there's a lot of ways that we can work together to make this happen. So.
Thank you so much, Julia, and to the girls for giving that awesome presentation. To wrap things up before we go into Q&A, we are going to watch the Girl Scouts low carbon concrete music video. Just make sure that everyone can hear it. Oh, okay. And yes, Molly, a recording will be sent out tomorrow. Let me try this again. Share screen, share slide. That's sorry.
Megan, they have a brief introduction to explain the video. Do you want them to go ahead with that?
Yes, go ahead while I am getting this set up.
After making our first video, the American Concrete Institution asked us to share our story at their 2022 national conference. We wanted to make it fun, so we made a music video to inspire people to care. We hope you all enjoy it.
Yeah, looks like we have run into a quick issue with sharing. Oh, no. Julia, I'm gonna give you the host so you can share from your computer if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't have access to change my Zoom settings. So you're gonna have to share and then do the share sound when it pops up.
Can you pass it to me? Is there a way to? I think it might just be that you if you unmute yourself when you show the video, it might work.
No, it's my computer. So you're the host now, so you should be able to share screen and show the video on your end.
Okay. All right. Give me a second. Okay.
Sorry about this, everyone. Here's the link moving forward to check it out too.
All right. I do share screen. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Can you all see that? Okay. Here we go.
We want to inspire people. We want to show everybody that they can make a difference.
Just some Midwest girls looking to help our world. Made of videos to share everywhere. Hollow carbon concrete helps lower embodied carbon. To get our message out, we can't stop there.
And spreading the word by TV, radio interviews, presentations to industry groups and local government. We even presented to our city's Board of Public Works. Very excited that they're taking action because of that.
Each treasure is a major chance for green concrete. Take a stance. Work together, you can make it right. Reduce carbon, 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 carbon. Where are your EPDs? Life cycle analysis, embodied carbon in the light. Reach out, people. Check out climate conscious options. Make your carbon footprint light. Ready mix can be green. Low carbon precast can be routine. Performance-based specifications, now is the time. Some reduce, some reuse. So many ways, which will you choose? Time to follow a great new trend. Lower carbon, 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 carbon. Let's start believing you can help our planet. Reach out, people. When you're building, protect our future. Greener concrete. Let's keep believing you can make a difference. Greener concrete.
That was awesome.
Yeah, this is a favorite of lots of people I've talked to before at Greenbuild and just in general. People love that video. So thank you for joining and for sharing that with us, girls. It's great to see all the work you've been doing. So we have about 5-ish minutes left. Are there any questions from the group of anybody on the panel? I see there are some former Girl Scouts, which is really exciting. So yeah, any questions, comments before we wrap up? One question that we had heard before, either for anybody on the panel, is what are some ways that you as youth or engaged with youth initiatives, what are some ways that kind of help break down barriers when you're talking to somebody who's never learned about embodied carbon before or is new to how to implement this into their projects? What kind of ways have you all used or seen before to have better communication?
Yeah, I can start. So, I think in general, there's kind of a commonality between most clients or people groups or whoever it may be to try and, leverage their project, whatever it is, to do the most good that they can. So I think just starting from that place, trying to figure out what the opportunities are as they relate to the project. I think you always have attention that comes out of constraints for any building. There's certain goals that are going to be in tension with each other, and some might be in support of others. And the priority stack of those different goals and initiatives might vary by project to project. But regardless of that being the case, I think everyone, again, wants to be able to accomplish the most good. So if you start from that frame of reference of what can we do, what are the possibilities, and work from there, I think that can be helpful to start, one, introducing the idea of, operational emissions and embodied emissions and, whole building carbon. And so once you kind of have that set up, you can start to talk about specific strategies. I think the benefit of embodied carbon is that there are a lot of things that can be done that are no additional cost. They might have very, very minor impacts on construction schedules or things of that nature, but a lot of it is just about being aware and making sure that you're selecting good materials, procuring good materials, and then putting in the right project specifications for things like concrete, steel, recycled material, reducing refrigerant, all of those things. And that can be done with very little impact to those other goals, and also still accomplish the most good possible on a project.
Great, thanks, Wyatt. All right, well, if there are no other questions, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up with a couple just call to actions, things you can do to get involved in next steps. As mentioned before, we have Carbon Leadership Forum has regional hubs. If you're not familiar with them, they are convenings of like-minded professionals and industry leaders and those involved in the embodied carbon world. So definitely recommend checking that out and seeing what your local regional hub is doing. In addition, we have the online community, which is just another forum for connecting, asking questions, and sharing resources. You can subscribe to the CLF newsletter to get updates on our sponsors, on projects, on things going on in the embodied carbon world, both within and outside of CLF. You can check out CLF and Carbon Zero Youth Initiative on LinkedIn. All of our contact info will be on the next slide. Invite the Girl Scouts to come speak about embodied carbon with your organization. Share the video, share their resources, and find ways for them to get involved, or just students in general, opening up opportunities for students to get involved, to give their unique perspective and to engage with this topic. And for more resources, CLF has a Take Action page that you can check out on our website, which gives all different options for no matter who you are, how to get involved in the embodied carbon problem and how to start addressing and taking action on all things embodied carbon. And so finally, here is all of our contact information. Feel free to reach out with questions, comments, concerns, anything else that we might be able to help you with. And yeah, thank you so much for joining and for giving your time today to hear all about big voices or little voices and big action to get youth involved in embodied carbon. And a recording will be sent out at some point. Thank you again to NBI and Aaron for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to talk about this really important topic.
Thanks, everybody.